Okay, so the first question is, what is your birth name?
My birthday is in October.
Okay.
I am a Scorpio. 26, 1918.
Okay.
And I just found out that it was the greatest influenza thing in Hungary and people just died from it. But I didn't die. Neither did my parents.
You're a true survivor from the beginning. And what was your first name and your last name when you were born?
Agnes. Back in Hungary they call you Agi.
Agi.
And it was Mandl, M-A-N-D-L.
And what city and country were you born in?
In Budapest, Hungary.
Okay. And where did you grow up? Even though you were born in Budapest, were you raised there or did you travel?
I was brought up in Hungary because back in Hungary when your family is well-to-do, they immediately get you a German-speaking Fräulein, a governess, and they got me not from Germany but from Austria, from Innsbruck. And she was with us. I never have eaten with my parents. I couldn't speak Hungarian. I could understand a little bit. But she was a horror, and she took my little goldfishes one day and put them all in the toilet and killed them all. And our cook, whom I put in another book, she was wonderful. She came to my father, and nobody ever heard that time of homosexuals. And he said to him, "Mr. Mandl, kick out this Fräulein at once. She hates your daughter, but she's in love with your wife. She's a homosexual. She already killed the little animals." And my father was he couldn't believe it, and he kicked her out at once. And that was the first time I was 6-year-old. I have eaten with my parents at lunch. I never have eaten with them. And Papa immediately got me a French mademoiselle from Switzerland, who was with us 14 years, and an English professor from England. So by the time I went to the junior high school, I spoke finally Hungarian, German, not the German, but Austrian German, French and English. And I grew up as an only Jewish child in a fantastic Protestant school, because my father said that was the best school in Hungary and he wants me to go there. And we went there, and the little principal, she said to my father, "Mr. Mandl, why do you want your little daughter to come to our school? We don't have any Jewish children. We have Catholics, but not Jewish." And Papa said, "I don't like a child who can only think one way." She liked that idea. Then she said to my father, "Every morning we have a 10-minute Bible reading and singing. The Catholic children are not allowed to come. Would you allow your daughter?" And I was smiling at Papa because I loved to sing. And Papa said yes. Then I was till 7 o'clock in the evening, I was there in that school. And we had a wonderful Protestant religious teacher. She was about 6 foot tall. And she said to me one day, said, "Agi, come, you have to learn about Judaism." I said, "Huh?" Because I knew nothing about it. And she said, "Did you know that that was the first religion in the world?" I said, "No, I didn't know." So what I learned about Judaism, and I learned from her.
What was her name?
Then, what?
Do you remember her name?
No,
Okay.
but I have it in my book, I think. I think I have it, Nora something. I think it's in my book. Then our principal retired. But before she retired, we had some people, "You bloody Jew," and so forth, and we had little fights. And one day I thought one of these Catholic children is coming to hit me. Then I turned around and I hit her. And she took us all and she said, "I don't like what you people doing. You are all the same people and you should..." They didn't even know Raoul yet, and yet I could talk about it. So anyhow, she retired, and we got a most fantastic Protestant priest who had 6 daughters and 3 sons, and he had a church. And I was their 7th daughter. I was constantly in their house, and it was wonderful. And I loved the school. It was great. And I wanted to become a Montessori teacher, actually. So what happened is, one day he came to our house, and he said to my father, "Arnold, do you listen to the BBC?" And Papi said, "No." He said, "The BBC just said that anyone who is not on the Jewish religion can be saved. And I want to save my 7th daughter." And Papi looked at him. He says, "How do you want to do that?" I said, "I want to baptize her. Let's go to the church." And we went to the church, and he stood there, and he had more tears than the water he puts on me. And he said, "After the war, if you want to go back to Judaism, you go, but right now you should be a Protestant child, a Reformed church." And Papa was loudly crying. He said, "Arnold, stop screaming. Down in the basement we are full of Jews and gypsies. If the Nazis coming, they kill us all." And you have to know, it was very interesting that the Catholics didn't help at all in Hungary. They rather took the people and gave them to the Nazis, except Raccanelli, the wonderful who from Italy. He wanted to help Raoul, and he sent Italian young priests over to help Raoul. He was fantastic. So in any case, the Protestants helped a lot, and later on he became a bishop. And it was very funny when first I went to Italy. As soon as it finished up, they told us that we first have to go to a young mother's school, and that was in a founding hospital. And there was a wonderful little 6-month-old boy with blue eye, and his name was Galiet, because have you ever been in Budapest, any one of you? The Galiet mountain is at the Buda side and the Pest, and they found this little boy in a bush, and we called him Galiet. And the moment I walked into the room, he put out his little hands, and the love affair was so big. And every time I went home, I said, "Papa, would you please adopt that little boy?" He said, "Are you crazy? People will think you are pregnant." I said, "Papa, they could see I was never pregnant." And then I got an influenza, and I had to stay home. And when I came back, my little Galiet wasn't there. And I screamed, and the doctors and the nurses ran to me and says, "Where is Galiet?" He said, "Somebody adopted it." I said, "Give me the address." He says, "No, we're not allowed to give the address, but your father came in, and he was telling us that you're constantly talking, and so we had to give him away." So I was beside myself, and it took me about 10 years when we went one day to Hawaii. And on the way over, I said how wonderful it would be to write about Galiet. And you can get my book in there too, by the name of Galiet. I wonder if he's still alive, you know, it would be lovely to know. But then also, back in Hungary, when you spoke a lot of languages and you were a scout, and I was a scout girl because my big cousin was a famous scout, then they asked us who spoke the languages to go around and help foreigners to show them Budapest. And once I had 20 Swedish people, and I was already, as a scout girl, I was corresponding with the whole world, as they do, men and women. And I was corresponding with one guy, too, all the time. And it's fine. So that was very wonderful. And then I went to Switzerland so that my French should be all right. And there it was a very interesting thing happening. In 43, no, it was in 1939, there was a Jewish Zionist meeting, and most of the people were from Poland. And in '39, on the 8th of September, suddenly, they went down swimming when they didn't have any meeting. And suddenly the radio blares. He said, the Nazis just overrun Poland. You should have seen these people's face, and they were all half naked, and they ran to the phones. And I stood there like a stupid little girl, and I said to myself, how wonderful it would be to help these people. But how can I do anything in 1939? Nothing. Then 3 of us, 2 college students and me, we went around, and we always slept over in youth hostels. And once we went to a youth hostels, and that was the following there. Jewish kids, Arab kids, you name it. And they all loved each other and were together. And again I stood there, I said, look how wonderful. They don't care about their color, their religion, of nothing. How wonderful it would be if I could help. But I stayed on for a while, and then my own family and my friends said, Agi, go home. Nothing going to happen in Hungary, okay? And in '43, on my father's birthday, I went back to Budapest. And the Hungarian Nazis were already there and did horrifying things. But I was there. And that time, it was very hard. We had to wear the yellow star. And also what was very funny, every second house they put the yellow star, because then they will not bomb. What was so stupid, because from 5,000 miles you can see which one has a star on it and which one doesn't. And so here I was, and I was that time writing poetry. And I didn't write it under Agnes Mandel, but I wrote it under Rolopa. You also have those books. There is Rome, London, and Paris. Okay?
That stands for...
Rolopa.
And it meant what?
That was my name for writing the poetry.
And how did you pick that name?
Well, by myself, because I lived in Rome, I lived in London, I lived in Paris. So I thought that would be a wonderful name instead of Mandel, you know, Rolopa. So then what happened in, not in 45, it was 44, I think, yeah. One morning, the mail brought us 2 letters. The one, I wrote poetry, and I sent it to a very famous Budapest newspaper. And it's called Újság. Újság means newspaper. And that was the best newspaper in Hungary. And it was handwritten by the head of that newspaper. And he wrote me, dearest Rolopa, I loved your poetry, but the censor doesn't allow us to put it in the newspaper. Evidently it was written against war and whatnot. And he said, but I am keeping it as ever for my present. And mommy was in the bathroom, and I screamed, Mommy, I got the Nobel Prize. And she thought I was crazy, you know. And she said, what happened? I said, look, what happened here? I still have his letter. He said, he took my poetry and he will take it forever for him. And the second letter came from the Swedish legation. And I said, what the hell is the Swedish legation want from me? And I opened up, and they said, would you please come up? We have to see you. Now, how you dared to go up with a star? And I thought, I can't go, and what do they want from me? But my cousin had a Christian boyfriend, and he said, I'll take you there. Next morning, I pick you up. And the whole house thought that the Nazis are picking me up, because he arrived with a Mercedes-Benz with this German flag on it. He had a German uniform, because by that time many Nazis were also killed, Germans, and the flag. And he pushed me in the car. And when we didn't have an ambassador, but his name was Mr. Danielson, We called him Minister Danielson. He looked out the window, and when he saw me coming out, he almost got a heart attack. He said, "Oh my God, this is a Nazi child." But when we arrived there, then my friend explained to him that she's not a Nazi child and neither I am, but that was the only way I could bring her up. So then we both listened to everything, and then he told me the following things, and I don't know how many of you heard about the Danish king, what the Danish king have done. The Danish king, when the the Nazis arrived, he put on a yellow slip over his arm, and he said, "I don't have Jews in my country, I only have Danes. And get out of here, and I don't allow you to be here." And he said he took all the Jewish people and put them in little boats and sent them over to Sweden. But these Danish people, when they come home, not like in Hungary, if you had to get out of your apartment, the maid was stealing everything within 5 minutes, or anybody else. Not in Denmark. When they came home, the people who had apartments, they found their apartments clean, only the key was changed, the icebox full of food and money on the table, and the people who had gardens and houses, their gardens were taken care, and the same thing inside. So these Danes can come home to their home in Denmark. And then Mr. Danielson said, and then he said the Swedish king heard about it, and he said, "All right, we have to do something too." And he advertised it all over Sweden, that anyone who has family, friends, business people, or somebody who got stuck in Hungary and want to be helped, come to the foreign department and we will help. And your fiancé Toto came right away. I said, "My what?" I was that time in love with an Italian like crazy. And he says, "Well, yes," and he said that you would be already his wife, but because of all this war, they didn't. So we have to keep you here on the embassy. And I was shocked, because that was the young Swedish man I was corresponding for years. But fiancé, being married or whatever. Very, very, very later on we found out that he was the greatest communist of Sweden. And thanks God I didn't have to marry him.
Did you meet him through through being a scout?
Yes.
You were a scout, okay.
Then I had these 20 Swedish people, and we kept corresponding like I corresponded with the whole world. So anyway, he said, "You have to stay there." So my friend said with the car, he said, "Well, how can I tell the family that she's going to stay here?" And I felt funny, a young person, but I wanted to live. But how can I just leave my parents? And they were in grandmother's house, and there was my mommy's sister who was also married to a Christian, and he helped all the time, and he was there. And he said, "Well, go back and tell them we will send some diplomats down." And they did, and they gave mommy and daddy, gave all my clothes and things like that, and I was 3 weeks at the embassy, but I was not the only guest. We had a German Christian woman who was married to a Swede, and she was stuck in Hungary because he was a businessman. Then there was a wonderful German girl with 2 little boys, also married to a Swede, and she got stuck. And then there was the very famous Hungarian man who got the Nobel Prize. His name, and now I'm forgetting the name, Stravinsky or something, but we gave him some false papers so that the Nazis can take him. And it was very, very interesting to be there. And one day, Mr. Danielson decided that we should have a little food outside. So there we are out on the garden and eating delicious food, what the Swedes have done. And suddenly I look up, and first it just looked like big birds flying up there. But then suddenly I saw something falling out of a bird, and I screamed. He says, "Let's get inside and get out, they are bombing us." And sure enough, they were bombing, the Nazis were bombing, and they shot down an American man, and he fell in the water, but they shot him in there again. So the horror were all on. Then our friend, my cousin's friend, came back with the Mercedes, and he said, Aggie has to come home. He said, why? He said, because every day the Nazis are coming now to the house, and her name is still on, and the whole family can be killed. So I looked at Mr. Danielson. I said, please let me go home. I said, Aggie, I am afraid to let you go home. But I said, I already hurt my parents for having my 3 weeks of this wonderful, 3 months of the wonderful time here. He said, yes, but you can't go down with him. You go on a bus, and the diplomat will go with you, because I want him to see where are you and which house. So I went down with him, and he sure enough immediately wrote up where I live, and he said, Aggie, call us every day when they allow you getting out. Sure enough, 2 weeks after, I call up and I said, Aggie, you have to come up at once, but you don't have to stay here. So my friend took me up there again, and there was Raoul Wallenberg.
Now, did you know who he was at this point? Had you ever heard of him?
No, and it was very funny because he was also 32-year-old and a Swede. And I looked at him and I said, oh my God, such a young man, and look at him, and he wants to come and help the people. And he already heard about me. And I was the first hostess for the whole legation. Wow. And then he asked, in the meantime, and I forgot to tell you that, the king also said that we have to, for all those people who still got stuck in Hungary, they have to give them real passports. And as I told you, this is a real passport. And Per Anger, who unfortunately, that time he was the first secretary, he died in last August. He was 88-year-old, and we worked day and night with Raoul, Per Anger. Later on he became an ambassador. But he made 800 of these papers. And he gave it to the people. But nobody could travel with it except his wife, who was pregnant, and that young lady with the 2 little boys. And thanks God they made it all the way to Sweden in the train.
Now, these were real documents? These were not forged?
No, these were real documents.
Okay.
Real passports. That's why we can also get the visas on it. They were real passports. But Raoul's first question was, what did you do to the people up there now? And Per Anger said, Raoul, we have given out 800 of this. He said, we have to save over 200,000 people, and you give out 8. And Eichmann, you know who Eichmann was? Eichmann was the German Nazi guy, the head of the Nazis. And he killed 465,000 people, not just Jews, but nuns, priests, gypsies, people in the wheelchair, and the Jews. And Raoul said, now we have to do something, that's no good. Eichmann cannot do this. So I am going to make a Schutzpass. And that is the Schutzpass.
Now, is that
and the
a
Schutzpass
real document?
Is a, I put it here, security pass. It's not a passport. You cannot really travel with it nowhere, and nobody could. And it says there in German and in, I can't even remember what language. You see, I'm getting old. In German and in Hungarian. And those people who were cheating, they wrote it in English and in German, but it isn't true. And it says that the Swedish embassy are giving this security paper to, and here it is, whoever was up there, that's my father, it so happens. And he said, He and all his belongings are protected by the Swedish government. And if we can collectively leave for Sweden, then 3 months after this paper is no good anymore. And even the Nazis somehow allowed him to put this out on the walls in Hungary. But it not always helped. But Raoul always found a way to help people. There was never a way that he would say no.
How did he come up with the idea for the Schutzpass?
Well, because he thought the passport alone is not enough. And he said this one should be with the picture on it, and that we take care of them. And somehow they allowed him to do it. And there is the Swedish crowns. Now those who made the cheating, they didn't even put the crowns on it, you know.
And how were they manufactured? Like now we have copy machines, real easy. We go to Kinko's.
Well, we had some machines too at the embassy, at the legation, and we could do things, you know. And it is a very funny thing. When I come to that story for you on the end, what happened about the Schutzpass. But it was fantastic, and of course he immediately made Schutzpasses to my mother and father and my aunts and everybody, so that at least I had that by them, you know. And later on, as you know, and then this was my paper to say that I work for the embassy. No, this one, that I work for the embassy.
How long did you work for the embassy?
Well, till 45, when the Soviet came in. And we didn't know that the Soviet was worse. We thought we didn't know that Roosevelt and Churchill sold out the Balkan. We thought they only coming to clean out the Nazis and we'll go. But they were worse than the Nazis. They picked up little children from the street and took them all the way to Siberia. Nobody ever heard of them. And of course, when they asked Raoul, who paid for your mission? And then very naively he said, well, the Americans, so he is a spy. And they took him.
The Soviets.
But that may be too, you don't know. We also had a fantastic Swedish Red Cross. Now, what Raoul did was incredible. First of all, he found a lot of Christian and Jewish doctors and nurses who were anti-Nazis. And we opened the hospital because we were very lucky that the people who lived in the pest side, they gave their apartment houses to Raoul, and we could put the people we saved with the Schutzpass in there to take care of them.
Those were the safe houses?
Safe houses. Okay. And we had about 35 safe houses there. And in every apartment, sometimes there are 2 families had to stay because we didn't have enough place. And in the Buddha side, there was the fantastic villas. And we got that from the very rich aristocrats. They gave us the villas over there.
Now, were the villas and the apartments empty, or did the original families live there and then have people come in?
Yes, that's right, and they let them all come in.
And live with
so
them.
Everything was full. And children also learned a lot from Raoul because Raoul was so fantastic. We also had an orphanage. And that woman you should meet too, Dr. Vera Gutkin. Today she was 7-year-old when she was saved by our Raoul. And that is very interesting too. So we had an orphanage too, and we had 79 children. And Raoul constantly, how can I help people, how can I help people? And there is in Canada a young lady, I can't remember her name. What happened is to her, her mother was pregnant. And suddenly one doctor called Raoul, and he said, Raoul, we can't get her into any hospital because she's Jewish. what shall we do? He said, oh, come to my apartment. You can work on her there. And he lied down outside in his on the floor while the doctors were working on the child. And when the child was born, they woke him up outside in the cold, and he became the godfather of the little child. And he did this all the time, non-stop. And he also had a fantastic mind to learn everybody's name. And he sent people out to say, learn all the Hungarian arrow crosses people's name. And I want not only the name, but I want to know which offices they are working.
Now, who are the Arrow Cross?
Arrow Cross was the Hungarian Nazis. Okay. They were even worse than the German Nazis. Horrifying, horrifying people. So one day, around 12 o'clock noon, and I still don't know where he got all the medication, everything. He got medication and food, and he could always give it to the people there. And one day, he came around midnight, in the afternoon. He came 12 o'clock noon to the hospital. And when he arrived, there were 3 little boys standing there, a 7, an 8, and a 9-year-old with a gun. And our Raoul didn't believe in guns, knives, or scissors. He said, if you're angry with someone, scream, but never touch. And this was the first time we ever saw him touch. He kicked those guns down of these 3 kids, because everybody was standing there with their hands up, and the sick people in the beds too. And he said, get out and bring me your officer. And the kids really ran away because he was so angry. And in 3 minutes, the man walks in. Raoul looks at him, and he says, Simon, what took you 3 minutes to get here? And the guy looks at him and says, how do you know my name? He says, I know everybody's name, and I am very, very angry that you're sending 3 little kids in here to dare to kill our people. And I said, and somebody is looking for you because you're going to be dead. Simon said, no. He said, yes, because by mistake you were shooting a German officer. And he died in our hospital here, but before he died, he gave your name. Simon left without a word. Our doctor looks at Raoul. We never had a German officer in here. Our Raoul sits down on the floor, hysterically laughing. He says, of course not, but that's how I saved you all. This is how our Raoul was. Then, a few weeks after, he went to, in the meantime, some youngsters who take care from outside of each of these houses. Suddenly, the Nazis came in, Nazi youngsters, and went down to the basement and took the old people out through the basement. And these 2 little boys look at each other. They spoke perfect German. And like Raoul, he spoke every language perfectly without an accent. Can you imagine? He spoke German, French, Italian, Spanish, and people said he also speaks Russian, not a word of Russian. And these 2 boys look at each other and said, why don't we do what Raoul did? And they ran away from the house, and they went up to these German kids. They were young too, and he said, how dare are you taking these people? We have to take them to General so-and-so. And of course the younger Germans had no idea who the general was. And he says, come on. And then one of the boys ran over to one of the gentlemen. He said, we are taking you back to Raoul. And they took all these people back to Raoul's house, because that's what Raoul gave us all. I was the same way. Whatever he gave me the strength, because it was important. So in any case, he came a few days after. He comes to the orphanage. Oh yeah, in the meantime, our 7-year-old got the scarlet fever. And she couldn't stay there because all the other kids would have gotten the scarlet fever. So he helped him to get in the Christian hospital. and instead of 79 or 78 kids. And the guard outside, he was shot in his arm, and he said, Raoul, again, 2 little kids came here, 7 and 9, and shot everybody. And one little boy, his mother, who was taken, but before she was taken, he told him, he said, if ever anything happens, try to hide. And this little boy went under a chair, and they never found him. So when the boom, boom, boom was over, he came out all dazed, and he walked out on the street, and the first person he met was his mother, who was in one of Raoul's safe house. I understand they live in Israel now, I don't know where. So he was an absolute incredible human being to always help, because it's no other way.
Help with the hospitals? Were there hospitals that were already built and he took over with the help of other people, or were there homes that were turned into hospitals?
No, this was such a big home that we could make a hospital out of it. And I don't know where he got the blankets and the beds and everything you can think of, he could always find.
And the children, and there's a part in your book where you describe that Raoul got down on his knees and cried when the children were killed in the orphanage, because he was very involved and attached to them.
Every day he took time, even if it was 10 minutes, to come to there, and he'd tell the children the stories, and he was singing with them every single day, because the children need me. And you see, Vera too, she got well after, and it was very interesting because she comes from Czechoslovakia, and her father was, or Romania, no, Czechoslovakia, her father was a doctor, and his mother always said, get out of here, there will be trouble. And he said, no, there will be no trouble, I rather stay. But one day he found all the German writing on his thing, so he said, I have to get out. Mommy was right. And she was only 7 years old, and they got a man who said, I help you and you pay me. But he took them to the wrong place. And the mother had to go with the child to one camp, and he went to another one. And it was horrifying. But Raoul heard about these camps, and he sent the Red Cross truck, because they spoke all the languages too, to this place, and they were screaming at the Germans, how dare are you taking these people? This is outrageous, and we want these children. Give us the children. And her mother was the only one who pushed her out. She couldn't understand why, but the mommy wanted her alive. And when she was in the Red Cross car, he said, well, Raoul will be so proud that we're bringing a child. And that's how she went there. Then, a few weeks, you heard about Horthy. Well, he was the Admiral of Hungary. And he had 2 sons. They both got killed, and one of them was terribly much in love with a Jewish girl. And there was one train coming with him and the Jewish girl, and another train with all women in it. And he was arguing that I want my fiancée back, that's my girl, and blah, 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 blah. And while they were fighting, Vera's Papa looked out the window, and so did the mother from the other car, and they looked at each other, and he said, oh my God, it's my wife and my husband, and he jumped off and ran over there. He says, get off quickly, I am in a horrifying camp, but as I am a doctor, they asked me to help. So if I get you there, I can tell that I took you, and I will give you a medication that will, like you are dead, but you won't. And sure enough, that's what they did. And she came there and she got this medication, and there they got a very lovely person who took them all the way to Hungary, because he also had a big family there. And when they arrived, the family said, you should go to Raoul, he needs doctors, and I am sure that it would be wonderful. So he said, all right, I go, and they went there, and he introduced himself. And he said, I understand you need doctors, but I have only one problem. I don't have my little daughter. And Raoul gives a big smile. He said, I have your daughter. And that's how they got together. I don't remember how they got out of Hungary eventually, but they came over here.
What a story.
Yeah, you know, no, he was a person who nothing ever he could do. But you also have to, where were we?
That he's quite a person.
Oh.
I have a question about him. I read about how he would get on top of the cattle trains and just start screaming, these are my people, and give out these documents and
Well,
stuff.
you see, he took not only Schutzpass, but marriage license, car things with him, and he wouldn't give it to anyone. And Per Anger was with him many times, and he couldn't believe it. And on the way to the train station where they took the people on these things, he was screaming at the people, anybody who has my papers, would you please get out? And about 100 people who got out from the street, and he gave them all kind of false papers, but it was nothing, and he brought them back. Then he did the same thing, going to the train station, and the first thing he did was the Hungarian police, if you give them drinks, they get drunk like hell. So his whole car was full of Hungarian wine, and he made the police real drunk. And when they were really drunk, he says, come on, I need your help. And first he went up on the top, but there was one young man, he said, Raoul, get down, the Germans want to kill you up there. So he came down, and then he yelled at his police, he said, open the door, because there were not real trains. And again he was full of all kind of papers, and he gave it out, marriage licenses and everything was, and again 100 people he brought back to Budapest.
So where did he get these papers from? Like the marriage license, the driver's
That, well, you know, we still don't know, because just like the food and the medication he got everywhere. Well, first of all, the Swiss never helped. But he called up Lutz and he said, you're helping us too. We had a Swiss Red Cross too, and we had a Portuguese Red Cross, but was very nice. And as I told you, Racanelli from Rome sent these young priests, and they helped whatever they could, you know, and he was incredible. But then 1945 came, and as I said, then the Soviet arrived, and that was a horror.
Was everyone at first welcoming them, thinking it was good news that they came, or no?
Well, in a way, yes. Because, well, in our apartment building where we were living then was very interesting, because there was a wonderful gentleman with his wife and mother and son, and it turned out that he was a Hungarian general. And the son wanted to commit suicide because he didn't want to get into the war, and they were anti-Nazis. But we became great friends. And one day he came and said, Agi, come to the door and look out. And the German guns were all lying on the ground outside. And he said, the Soviet is coming. And we thought that it will be all right, but the Germans went over to the Buddha side, and they were fighting for years, and the Soviet was even worse. They took the general and his son. They didn't believe that he was not a Nazi, but thanks God they came home somehow. But he stayed our wonderful friend, and his son was in love with my cousin, and well, there is so many million things to tell you, and it's very, very hard. But what happened is
story.
It's, for instance, how I got everything changed. My parents, as I told you, they had to move into Grandma's house, and our apartment was still there. And one day, no, I still had the star on, and I said, Raoul, how can I work here at the embassy with the star? He said, and he started laughing, and so did Taranger. He said, you won't have that star anymore. I said, how come? He said, you're going to go down to the police department right now, and they will cut off the star. And you know, when Raoul talks to you, he said, if he is strong, I can be strong. And I knew that the Hungarian head of police was the greatest Nazi. But when I arrived there, he must have gotten an awful lot of money from the Swedish government, because he took me in his arm and kissed me. He said, I am so proud to be the one who cut off your star. And I thought, am I crazy or he's crazy? But he cut off the star, and as I walked out, I hear people screaming, here goes a bloody Jew. But I made it back to the consulate. Then next morning, Taranger gives me a paper. He said, Agi, the Nazis are the only ones who have it, but you have to go there, Hungarian Arrow Cross, and you have to get your apartment back. Here is the paper. But of course it was made out to my father's name. And I got dressed up very beautifully. I figured, why not, being like that, you know, if Raoul can do it, I can do it. And I threw this paper to the man, and then I thought, am I crazy? He might kill me right away. But they must have gotten a lot of money too, because he looked at me for a minute and then he signed. And I got the paper back, and I couldn't believe it. So now I thought, all right, I go back to my apartment and show it to the super, who lived on us for years and years and years. And he was so surprised to see me alive. And when I went there, he said, what do you want? I said, my apartment back. And his wife said, oh, our daughter already has your... No, he said, my daughter has your apartment. And the wife says, and I don't know what he done to his wife, he said, our daughter already has another apartment too. But he said, anyhow, you have to go first to our lawyer for the house. And again, I dressed up very beautifully, and I walked over to this Nazi guy, and he said, I give you the signature if you promise me one thing. I said, what? He said, you will tell the Soviet that I was always wonderful to the people. And I did, I knew in America you do like. I said, yes, 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 I will. And he gave me the paper. And then walked up to the apartment, and the whole apartment was empty except the maid's room. And when we opened the maid's room, all our carpets, furniture, books, everything was in there. And I thought, gee, he is not so bad. And I turned around and he looks at me and said, I will get even with you yet. Okay. But we got the apartment back, and Raoul immediately sent the Schutzpasses to my parents and all that, and we moved back in that apartment. And then the rest of our mommy's family also sort of moved back and moved in there, because there were some apartments empty, and the general was still there, our darling friend. And one afternoon, the old people always went to sleep, so the general's son and my cousin and me, we went down to the basement, but the basement had only one door. You couldn't go anywhere. And we hated cards, but that's what we were playing. Suddenly a Russian soldier walked in with a gun, and our super was there who spoke Russian too, and he was asking for gold, 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 and gold teeth. And I said, we don't have any gold teeth. And he must have told him something else. And in that moment, a card fell down. And I put my head down, and even my two friends thought that I was shot, because he shot right over my head. It went into the wall. But it wasn't me. But I was all dizzy. And we went out, and everybody yelled, Agi was killed, but everybody looked out and Agi wasn't killed. just that I was this. And then a Russian officer came and took away this horrifying man. And I did terrible things, and that's why I learned a few words in Russian, the davai chasi, that means give you a watch. They never saw watches in their life. They came from Siberia without shoes, would you believe it? And the real officers came on American trucks and so forth. But then they had watches from here to here, and they came tick-tock, tick-tock. And one of them took my camera and gave it to a little boy upstairs, but the little boy knew me very well, and he gave me back my camera because he knew. It was incredible. And so then one day, as I said, the general said, please come out and see what happened. Now the Germans are over in Buda, and they were fighting and fighting and fighting. But even so, that I had to be like Raoul. If Raoul can do, I can do if people need something. And Papa, we didn't have any water. And there was one house, I remember, not very far, but had a how you call that? A well outside. And I figured I'd go over there and bring Papa water. And Mommy's family said, are you crazy? I said, no, Papi has to shave. And I walked out. And an old gentleman walked with me, and they still shot. And shoo, you hear from Buddha to Pest, from Pest to Buddha. And an old gentleman walked beside me, and suddenly we hear the shoo, and he was hit and died. And his wife was in the window. But I lived, and I brought the water home. Then 2 days after the telephone still worked, I get a phone call from a couple whom I knew very well. He says, Agi, can you help our little daughter? I said, what do you want me to do? He said, would you please take them to the nuns so that she can live? I said, yes, of course. And I picked up the little girl, and on the street they were still shooting like crazy. And I was holding her hands and telling her stories, and put our heads down. How we made it all the way to the nuns. And the nuns took her in. A couple of days they called me again, said, Agi, could you pick her up again? And as I said, I am like Raoul Wallenberg. If Raoul could do something, I have to do something. Nothing else I can do. And sure enough, I went back, and over the window they gave me the baby, and we took it back and went back to the parents. And then I had, and I still call them my sisters, they live now in Boston. They were, well, yeah, it's a long story. I don't know if you're interested. When my father was a young man, I was already a husband and father. He had to go in for the First World War, and he didn't want to go and kill anyone. So he had to figure out something that he could do to get out. And what he did, he went on a hunger strike for 3 days, and then he has eaten a salami. And he became violently ill. And the Hungarian government thought, we can't have a soldier who will get sick every moment. And one man comes up to him, he said, Arnold, how did you do that? So Papa told him, he said, I can do it, I am an Orthodox Jew. So Papi looks at him, he said, you want to be an Orthodox Jew or you want to get out of the army? He listened to Papa, and he has eaten the thing. And we stayed friends. He came, he was a lawyer. He came to the house, then he went to Germany, and he met a very, very rich Jewish lady, and they fall in love, and they came to Hungary. And Auntie Ruth became our best friend, and she always came to the house. I want a child like Agi, and then her daughter was much, much more beautiful than me. She got 2 daughters and a son. And eventually he died in a heart attack, the husband. And she went back with the children to Germany. But then we kept on writing to come back to Hungary, because we just loved them. And every day we went out to, no, Papi went to the railway station, and they didn't arrive. And one day he called us on the phone, the girls arrived without mommy. So the girls came, and of course we were all crying like crazy because it was such happiness. And where is mommy? He said, mommy will come too, but right now she couldn't go. And the boy, thanks God, they had a wonderful governess whom the Nazis said, get out of here, otherwise you will go too to the camp. And he said, I'd rather go with them to camp, but I never go anywhere. But my aunt was clever enough, Auntie Ruth, and quickly sent the boy to England. And so he survived over there. But the two girls came first. So Papa was crying so hard that he went out on the street after, and he never came back. Suddenly we got a note that Papi was taken to the police station. So of course we were terribly frightened, and I called Raoul immediately, and he couldn't come, but immediately he sent me 2 diplomats. And with the car we went to the police station, and it turned out that Papa went out and he had some bread. He wanted to buy some bread to bring home. And I said, show me your paper. And Papi showed the Schutzpass. He said, this is nothing, get to the police. And then it happened 3 or 4 times. A German came and he let Papi go out. The Hungarian took him back in again. And then finally they walked them in a very far, for hours to walk. It was cold already, it was December 44, I think, 44. And there was a big arena where they used to have dancing and they took them all there, and all night long they were standing there. And Papi still had the Schutzpass, and in the morning some German officers came, and Papi said to them in German, let me go home, the family is waiting for me. He said, do you have any papers? And Papi showed them the Schutzpass, and they throw him out.